This is Hannah Burner from Giggly Squad. O-Pill is the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Let's be real, getting a birth control prescription is not always easy, and it's so much admin. In fact, about a third of women face barriers to access prescription birth control. Between scheduling appointments, missing work, class, or just trying to exist, it's a lot. But now O-Pill is putting birth control in our control. O-Pill is a daily birth control that's FDA approved, full prescription strength, and estrogen free, and 98% effective when used as directed. Grab it online or at most major retailers, no prescription or doctor's appointment needed. So if you're thinking about birth control, check out O-Pill to see if it's right for you. Use code GIGGLY for 25% off your first month of O-Pill at OPILL.com. That's code GIGGLY at OPILL.com. Birth control in your control. We love to see it.
Hello everyone and welcome to How the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us hot off the heels of Sunderland's game in the Algarve, a 1-0 defeat to Sporting Lisbon, but wasn't a negative experience. I think there was a lot of positives to pluck from that one, and I've got two men with me this evening to chat all about it. First off, it's Bomber. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. You okay?
I am very, very good, apart from we lost, but, you know, we're going to get into that, aren't we? It wasn't too bad. Also with me for the first time in a little while, because he's back from gallivanting all over Europe, it's Martin. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. Yeah, it's I've been on my pre-season tour, so back and ready for action. We watched the Seville game on Saturday, and me and Andrew talked about that one. And this was another game to follow that up and build up that pre-season fitness and tactics and all that sort of stuff. So I think there was some promising signs tonight.
There was actually, I know if people are listening to this and they maybe didn't catch the game and they see the result and they go, oh, well, we didn't score, we got beat. They might just think it was either a really flat game or just we didn't play very well. But actually, I was pretty happy. Like, I'm sitting here right now and I'm not disappointed really with what I saw because, yeah, it's a pre-season game. So you can't get too carried away when you win and you can't get too carried away when you lose. But if you're going to lose, you want something resembling a positive performance off the back of it. And given we played two entirely different 11s, basically, against a really good side. I mean, I don't know a lot about Sporting Lisbon other than going into the game, knew they were the Portuguese champions. I mean, the lads in our group chat seem to know everything about every player. Well, I've never heard of any of them. But when you look them up, you know, they're all internationals, they're all top players. I mean, there was a moment in the second half where I'm like, that number 6 looks quality for them. I wonder if he's any good. I wonder if we've got a chance of getting him. Search him up. He's the second coming of Christ. he's Portugal international, starts every game, 100-odd games for Sporting, 20-odd-year-old. Like, you know, probably going to go for 80, 90 million at some point. But there we go.
The shows I've got Chelsea anyway.
Well, you know, it shows I've got an eye for a player, Bomber. That's what it is. But yeah, I mean, we played a good side, and I thought actually, when we had our quote-unquote strongest team out in the first half, I thought we were the better team, even though we were getting beat. And then in the second half, when you see the complete contrast of experience and people sort of playing out of position and things like that, we give a good account of ourselves. So you can't really, I don't know about you, Martin, but I don't feel too disappointed with that. I think it was all right.
Well, look, I think in pre-season you look for the positive signs, and you also look for the areas that we need to improve upon. And it was actually, to me, it's almost like you're looking at two different games because of the virtue of the fact that we changed all 10 outfield players again at halftime. And then obviously we brought a couple of players on during the second half as well, didn't we? And I think the most promising thing for me was, again, it was the same as Saturday as well. It's that midfield. And you kind of see why we wanted to get some quality players into the club early. Because that midfield is going to be pivotal for us for the whole of the season. And it's building up those understandings with the players around them. So I think, Sadiki, Diarra and Le Fee as a three, they really show good connection. They're all exceptionally good players. And there was even a point in the first half where I think Trey Hume had gone in or stepped up for a tackle, and Diarra was coming round to cover him. And you can kind of see those little bits of understanding there that kind of getting established already early, which hopefully will set us up well for the season. I think that midfield is the most promising aspect of what we've seen in pre-season so far. And you contrast that with the second half, and look, you've got Dan Neil coming on, who should be pushing those three for a starting place. He didn't really look as if he is of the same level, and there's a number of factors involved in that, isn't there? But I think the most promising thing for me was that midfield. I think either side of that, in defence, goalkeeper, and attack, there's probably more questions than answers at the minute. I think that's where we'll kind of see some focus, in our transfer activity going forward in those positions. But again, that midfield three with the two wingers either side, I thought was the most promising aspect of that first half.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I don't know about you, Bomber, but Sadiki I'm already convinced Sadiki is quality. Like we know Enzo Le Fee is a good player. We know less about Diarra, but again, had a very good game. But just there's something about Sadiki, and I know I'm probably getting carried away because it's only a handful of pre-season games, but I just really like him. I love players who do that, where he's on everything, covers every blade of grass. He's got a bit of pace about him. I mean, we've heard the comparisons to Kante, and I know you might think, oh, but Kante was a world-class footballer in his prime. But he's that kind of player, isn't he? Maybe not the biggest, but he's wiry and he gets stuck in and he's quite quick and he's determined. I really like Noah Sadiki, but Martin made a good point there, I think, and I tweeted this during the game from our account, but I think it's pretty clear to see already that's going to be the midfield three at the start of the season if everyone stays fit. I mean, they're obviously trying to build up some sort of understanding between them three players, and they're all very different players too, aren't they? I mean, Le Fee looks so much more comfortable with good players. That's not a disrespect players he played with last season, but like 20-odd million pound players around Enzo Le Fee, he looks a different player as well. So, I have to agree with Martin. I think that midfield trio was the biggest positive to probably draw from the game.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. And this is actually the first time I've seen the three of them together, because I didn't get to watch the Sevilla game. I was determined to sit down and find some time to watch this tonight, because I purposely stayed away from the YouTube compilations and highlight reel packages of any of the new signings that we've signed, because I really want to make my own mind up about them and not get too excited or not think that they're this, that, and the other. But that first 45 minutes, there's levels to the game of football. And for me, that the first 45 minutes, in particular, that midfield battle looked like, a Europa League tie or a Midland Champions League tie. Whereas the second half looked like a lower league team that was coming to a higher league team to give them a bit of a run around and give them some fitness. That's how it came across to me. And again, I don't want to be disparaging to Dan Neil. He's a very, very good footballer, but Sadiki and Diarra probably taught me a few lessons potentially, and I hope he was paying attention, because it was a different level. And I know there's different players around him. If you took Sadiki out or you took Diarra out and put Dan Neil in, would Dan Neil have performed better? The answer's probably yes. But still, they just look absolutely class. And I've only seen them for 45 minutes. I'm already excited about about what's to come and the season starting. And you're quite right. It's not disparaging on the players that Le Fee was playing with in the Championship last season, but there's just that extra something special about that midfield three, and it just lets Le Fee shine that little bit brighter. And I mean, like I keep saying, I'm so excited for the season to start with those three. Like you say, there's still a little bit of work to do, and I'm sure we'll come on to that. But as an opening piece to talk about those three, I could spend an hour talking about them. They were fantastic.
Yeah.
And the thing with Le Fee as well, if you think about it, we saw him in patches last season, but we actually never saw him fit, and we never saw him play in his proper position. So while we've kind of, we've got a bit of an insight into the type of player he is and some of his strengths, we haven't actually seen him play properly. So he is, I know he is technically a new signing, because he confirmed his loan move after the playoff final, but he to me, he really is a new signing, because I think there's levels to him that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, and one of the other big positives I would like to point out is Jensen Seelt at the back. I know you really sung his praises on the reaction pod after the Sevilla game, and again, I just we've got to caveat all of this by saying the pre-season games you don't want to get too carried away with things, but if we just signed Jensen Seelt for 10, 15 million quid, and we'd seen the performances that we've seen so far in pre-season out of him, we'd be really optimistic about him, and we'd be saying, him and Ballard together for the West Ham game looks like a good pairing. Like, I think he's really shocked me. Actually, I don't say that because he hasn't played well before for us, but given the length of time he's spent out on the sidelines, I think it's going to be tough to ask him to step straight into Premier League football. But he's certainly done himself no harm, Martin. I think you've got to give credit to Jensen Seelt, and he looks to me. And we signed him as a kid, so this is not normal. But it looks like he's grown. He's massive, isn't he? He's like absolutely huge. And
he's strong,
when he's been on the ball as well, he looks really comfortable on the ball. He looks like he fits in there, and you've got to say hats off to him because he's getting an opportunity because other players aren't fit, and he's probably they're looking at him and going, well, we've got to give him a chance really because we don't really have any other central defenders. But he played very, very well.
He did, and look, I was talking to Andrew about this after the Seville game, and I know some people have been really high on Jensen Seelt and think he's shown a lot of potential so far. And until this pre-season, I hadn't kind of seen much of him at all. Really, I think he had a few games where he played fullback. He had maybe one or two games where he played centre back, but I always thought he looked a bit cumbersome and a bit slow on the turn. But I think, in the two games this week, the Seville game and Sporting game, and look, I know we keep saying it's pre-season, but these are two very good sides. And they're both ahead of us in terms of their pre-season development. Both seasons kick off earlier than ours does. So they're a week or two ahead of us in terms of pre-season anyway. So, there are some conclusions to be drawn or some opinions to be formed. It's not as if we're playing against Dartford or Darlington. We're playing against some good sides, some good opposition. But I thought Seelt looked fantastic. I thought he looked really composed on the ball defensively. He looked strong, good in the tackle, good in the air. And alongside Ballard, he played well. The concern for me, and I think it's something that you'll probably agree with. It just underlines the lack of strength and depth that we have in defence. And I think even Dan Ballard. We were talking about this in our chat the other day, Gav. But Dan Ballard, I think everyone's really high on him at the minute because of his playoff performances. If the season ended after 46 games and we'd gone up automatically, would everybody be going Dan Ballard's a starting centre half in the Premier League? Probably not, because he started 12 league games last season. He's missed vast chunks of the last 2 seasons or 3 seasons through injury. I thought he had a really poor 2024. All told, I thought his form was kind of dipped. So I think
we said we said that pretty clearly, didn't we, over the season?
No,
I remember talking about that quite a lot about Ballard. Yeah.
And I think Dan Ballard, fit and on form, is potentially a Premier League central defender. But how much can we rely on him and Seelt at this point? And it's probably you're going to be taking a flyer if you pin your hopes on either of them. So both of them played well. I think. Going back to the original point of the conversation, I thought Jensen Seelt was great. I thought he had a great game, really stood up to the challenge. And you're right. Look, if we just signed him, and if he, again, caveat, if he'd had 100 odd games playing for PSV or whatever it is, and he's coming in, turning in that performance, you're going, bloody hell, we've got a good player there. He looks as if he could do it. The fact that we've known his story over the past 2 seasons makes you sort of second guess that a little bit. But, absolutely tonight, on the evidence tonight, he passes the eye test. He stood up well, played well. And, you certainly wouldn't rule him out the equation to come in and play games in the Premier League. If we go into the season, or certainly go after the transfer window, with him and Dan Ballard as our regular starters, you obviously got Luko Nye and Naji Elise to throw into the equation as well, but they've got injury concerns too. So, you'd expect to see some defensive reinforcements come in sooner rather than later, wouldn't you? But no, look, I thought he did well, and I think he's put himself into the equation to be part of that Premier League squad, which, for him, that's all he can ask.
Yeah, you mentioned Ballard there. I thought their goal aside, I thought he did have a canny game. I actually thought the big lad up front for them, he wasn't the best player, but he put himself about, and you don't see much of that in pre-season normally. So it was probably good for our two centre-halves to get knocked about a bit. I mean, still got smacked in the face a few times, few stray elbows and things like that, but I don't mind that. I think it's probably what he needs,
Well, I think that's what the team needs, isn't it? Sorry, Bomber, but like against Seville as well, it was a really physical game. And I think they've probably chosen some of these fixtures for that. It gets you right up to speed. You're playing proper football rather than training sessions. And, hopefully it stands us in good stead.
Yeah, and Ballard, Bomber, like I say, I think he had a canny enough game, but, I'm going to sicken people saying this, but it's only pre-season, blah, blah, blah. But he does get done by that. It's a really good ball, but for their goal, for me, I think it's Ballard. It comes down Ballard's side of the defence and he gets done by it. And look, it is a good ball, but again, you're going to be coming up against that kind of quality in the Premier League. So that's one to keep an eye on, I think. Just, you've got to be wary of the fact that when we're playing top teams in the Premier League, they're going to have that kind of quality to catch you out. So I think Martin makes a good point. Yeah, Ballard is a good player, but I think it's clear to see where we need reinforcements in this team. I mean, I would love to see us in the next week or so get that centre half in and allow them the time to get to bed in. We're talking about Sadiki and Diarra and even Le Fee to an extent playing in his proper position, and the wide players that we brought in all having that time to bed in. For me, I look at centre half and think we need someone soon. I think that's the one position where we probably do really need that reinforcement.
Yeah, that was the thing that was kind of glaringly obvious. When you're rolling out the second half and you in midfield, you can still roll out Dan Neil and Patrick Roberts, but in defence you have to play Triantis and Zach Johnson as your two replacement centre halves. Just smacks of a distinct lack of depth there, doesn't it? But yeah, like you said, Ballard and Seal or whoever is in there, they're going to face 38 games of those sorts of balls and that sort of attacking prowess this season. So whoever's in there is going to have to get used to it pretty quick, because there are no Premier League experience, no Premier League appearances between them. Between Elise and O'Nien and Ballard and Seal. So whoever's going in there is kind of jumping in at the deep end head first, really. So yeah, that's something I'd like to see that done in the next week to 10 days, because then we've still got a good kind of 2 or 3 games left for them to bed in. All right, they've missed out on kind of some of the preliminary work that's gone on in the Algarve from a training perspective, and they'll be catching up in terms of getting ingratiated into the team. But there's still time. What I wouldn't want to do is have the season start, us ship a few silly goals, and then all of a sudden the transfer window's borderline closing and we make a few hasty decisions. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen because of how we've gone about our business so far this season or this pre-season. But that would be one worry, I think. But just to touch on your point as well, both of you have kind of poo-pooed the fact that it's just pre-season, etc., etc. Sporting Lisbon have only got one pre-season game left before they went straight into a Super Cup in 10 days' time, I think, against Benfica. So they're gearing up for competitive football. This wasn't just a little training ground exercise for them. And like you said, you could see that in the physicality. So Harder in particular, throwing himself around everywhere, grabbing Triantis, pushing him around, grabbing Hume by the scruff of his neck, pushing him around. And it was good to see our players stand up to that, because that is going to be the rigours of Premier League football. Everyone's going to be wanting to kick you and push you. People have these preconceived ideas that the Premier League is beautiful football and the Championship and the EFL is where you get kicked lumps out of and you kind of become strong. It's not necessarily that. In the Premier League, they'll hit you harder, they'll run at you faster, and it's about how you handle that. So, a lot of our players tonight got a bit of a taste for that, and it was really good, first half in particular, to see them stand up to it.
Yeah, I quite liked as well, I'm talking about positive, some of the transitions, Martin, when we were, particularly in the first half, actually mainly in the first half, when we were getting forward with the ball, but it was probably 4 or 5 occasions where it was like 5 or 6 nice passes, particularly Le Fee, finding space and getting people in down the sides and just cutting them open and stuff. That and I talked about this the other day, but when you consider that these players haven't really played together that much, that's promising. I think that they've already got that kind of level of understanding, and Le Fee seems to be taking up a leadership role on the pitch, which I think is quite promising because he's almost sort of running games, isn't he, or trying to run games. And when you see the way we're moving the ball at times is really good. I mean, Adingra and Tolby didn't necessarily have brilliant games, but they were involved, and we were finding them. And Mayenda was doing his usual thing of driving at defences, and we had some decent chances actually in that first half, and it was all well worked. It wasn't like we were playing long balls. It wasn't really like their goal, which was a kind of a really good but long ball over the top of the defence. We were trying to work openings, and we managed to do that against a Sporting Lisbon defence, which has got some quality football, isn't it? So I think, again, and just to add to what Bomber said, when you're doing that against a team who are probably 85, 90% of the way through their pre-season, I think that's, another promising sign.
No, look, it is, and I think the biggest standout for me within that was the quality of the passing and the quality of the interchange and the quality of the movement between not only the midfield three but the two wide players as well. I thought we kept the ball well, and it's almost like you kind of turned up the dial in terms of the quality of the passing, even the weight of the passing. And they all linked up well together and showed a good understanding of it. In the course of that first half, we did create a number of good chances. And, the biggest question in that respect that emerged for me was around Mayenda, because he missed a sitter on Saturday. He missed a great chance in the first half today. And if you get those chances in the Premier League, we need to score them.
Yeah.
And, the question I would have with that is, are we going to go out? Do we need to go out and sign an absolute first choice striker? Because it would be an awful lot to ask of Mayenda, bearing in mind that, this time last season, nobody would have put him as first choice or even kind of near the first team for a championship season. And he did remarkably well, and he came on strong in the second half of the season. But he's still a young lad. He's still raw. He's got huge potential. But I think if you're pinning your hopes on him to play 38 games and be our lead striker, you're probably asking them to take a step too far. So that's kind of the biggest thing in terms of that chance creation. It's actually the conversion of it. And I think that's kind of where we, again, transfer-wise, we're probably going to be targeting that over the next couple of weeks. But, again, going back to your original point there, like the interchange in midfield, the transitions that we had, again, it just shows we've got quality footballers in there. And, as you both point out, playing against quality opposition who are close to their season starting. And look, there's an awful lot of promise from what we've seen so far in pre-season. I'm kind of just looking forward to seeing how it develops over the coming weeks.
Yeah. It's funny because at half-time, Bomber, when the team for the second half emerged, I kind of looked at it because I noticed Sporting Lisbon hadn't made many changes, and I thought, oh God, there's going to be a bit of a massacre here. But you know what it is? Credit to the players who came out. They did really, really well. I was properly impressed with the two young kids at fullback, Jones and Lavery. They looked completely at ease. Particularly Jones, I don't know much about these lads. I haven't really seen them play very much, but they looked absolutely fine. Neka Triantis, as we know, is actually seen as a midfield player now, but he's playing out of necessity in the defence just to get him on the pitch and get him minutes. And because we don't have any other defenders, looked great. Zach Johnson was comfortable. You go around the rest of the pitch. Robert had his moments. Diarra started the half really well. He had that run at their defence, which won us the free kick on the edge of the box. Abdullah is just a proper grafter up top, winning the ball and holding on to it. And, obviously very raw, but you can see that there's something there with him. And then obviously later on in the half, Matty Young came on and Trey Ogunsui came on. So it was effectively the under-21s team with a smattering of first teamers in the case of sort of Dan Neil, Alan Brown, Patrick Roberts. But again, Sporting Lisbon had their strongest team on the pitch for most of that game. And it might have just been the fresh legs and the enthusiasm, I don't know, but they looked okay. And that's what you want to see, right? I mean, as I said, my preconception when I saw that team run out was they're going to get butchered here. Mm-hmm. But they didn't. They were fine. We didn't concede another goal. didn't really look like conceding another goal either, which is probably the more telling thing. It wasn't like, we got battered and they were missing chances or whatever. We defended really well as a unit. And then when we did break forward, we looked all right. I mean, you could tell clearly the quality wasn't on the pitch that was there in the first half, but still, did all right. And like I say, I just wanted to give props to mainly the defence, actually. I think the defence did very well.
Yeah, considering it was, I wouldn't say a makeshift defence because you got people playing in their natural positions, but it's certainly, a young second choice or first choice for an under-21s team setup. And you're right, you've got to give them credit. They've come up against pretty much the exact same Sporting Lisbon team that the first half Sunderland had to come up against. And in some respects, they've surpassed the first half Sunderland team because they haven't conceded a goal. I would say that there were periods in the middle of that second half where Sporting had really slowed it down to a walking pace and were kind of knocking it around. And it felt like if they really wanted to, they could put us under a bit more pressure. The thing that I found quite interesting is that the second half, when you introduced Neil and Brown, there were very recognisable patterns of play from the Championship season last season, whereas the first half felt very fresh, very new, very exciting. And I'm referring to kind of sideways passes between Brown and Neil, knocking it back.
Just on that, though, to ask you this, when you're Dan Neil in particular, and perhaps Patrick Roberts and Alan Brown, and it's quite clear that you've just came on as the second string,
yeah,
do you think that makes a difference to how they play or not? Because I do wonder that when you see particularly Le Fee, Sadiki and Diarra played that well in the first half, and Dan Neil is the captain of the team who starts every week normally, he's looking at that and going,
it must be unnerving. It must be unnerving. Yeah. And maybe that's what they've done. They reverted to type. All last season it was drilled into them to play in a certain way. And we saw those patterns of play throughout the season, didn't we? It was sideways across the midfield, back to the defence, went across the defence, and then seeing if we can play out wide. Whereas first half, we were through the middle, we were out wide, we were kind of everywhere. So it probably is a little bit. Fear is probably not the right word. I can't put my finger on the right word, but they're probably looking for some sort of safety blanket and doing what they did last season and putting on a display that does that well. Is it going to be good enough for what we need in the Premier League is the big question. If we're coming up against Premier League opposition week in, week out, with Dan Neil and Alan Brown playing sideways passes and then passing it back to Jensen Seelt and Dan Ballard, we'll get beaten every week. But it's a tough one because I really like Daniel. He's been one of my favourite players over the years, but I can't help but watch that first half. And admittedly, it is only the first 45 minutes I've seen in that midfield. And unless you move Le Fee to where Harrison Jones kind of was and slot Dan Neil in there, I don't really see where he gets in at the minute, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, Jones
really pains me.
Didn't he?
Yeah.
Jones was a left back, so you're not going to push Le Fee.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, no, sorry.
You think of it? We've got them in Joneses. I'll let you off.
On sofa, I've got the sofa score lineup in front of me, and it's got Harrison Jones just behind my under on the one I'm looking at. But so they've got it as a 3-5-2, I guess, with Harrison Jones just behind when it obviously wasn't that.
Must have been pissed whoever wrote that.
Yeah, but I mean, looking at that, as I look at it, they've got Hume, Ballard, Seelt as three centre backs, Tolby and Adingra on either wing. No, but just looking at that, that's playing that sort of system is the only way I can see and moving Enzo Le Fee further forward. It's the only way I can see Dan Neil getting into that sort of that team, really.
And look, Dan Neil's an interesting one, isn't he? And I think there's obviously going to be injuries and suspensions and all that sort of stuff throughout the course of the season, and you can't just have a first 11, can you? But you kind of wonder whether this whole contract situation with Dan Neil has actually created this situation. Like if Dan Neil had signed a new contract at the end of last season, do we make the signings that we've made already? Potentially yes, but potentially no. He's possibly forced the club's hand to some extent. What you've got to hope with Dan Neil now, if he stays, I actually expect him to go. I think this contract situation has been rumbling on for 18 months now, and he's out of contract at the end of this coming season. the club are
There needs to be a decision this summer, doesn't there?
Absolutely.
Got to be a
Look,
decision.
and on a number of levels, right? So in terms of Dan Neil as a footballer, but Dan Neil as a team captain, like you can't go into the season with him as team captain if he's not going to be here in 6 months' time.
You're always not getting into the starting 11.
Well, that's kind of a different thing, isn't it? But I think you obviously do need some stability there, and you need some assurance that what you've got at the start of the season is going to sort of see you through, which is kind of why I think we've moved early with our midfield. If Daniel does stay, which look, I would love the news to come out tonight. Daniel signed a new 5-year contract. He's blah blah blah. What you'd hope then is that the players he's got around him now actually help him step up a level, because as we've talked about with Le Fee, stepping up a level with having better players around him, Dan Neil can do the same, right? So I think it's kind of unfair to judge Dan Neil on that second half performance, where, with greatest respect to Alan Brown is a championship midfield player. He's not going to be a Premier League player. I think if you look at, well, he might be a name, but in terms of actual performance and all that sort of stuff, he's not going to be cutting it up at Premier League level, I don't think. I think if you look at the second 11 that came on, the question I was asking myself when I was watching that is, how many of these players do I think or want to be able to play in our first team next season? And you go, well, Dan Neil can step up. I've got no qualms about him playing Premier League football if it comes to that. Patrick Roberts potentially could. You wouldn't be bothered if Roberts was in starting 11 against West Ham. And then after that, you kind of got question marks. You think, well, maybe Abdullahi could come in and do a job, but he's so raw and inexperienced. You kind of think he needs to go out on loan to get some experience of English football before we throw him into Premier League football. So maybe a championship loan, or at least a very top League One loan. Triantis, he could come in, but again, completely unproven. And he's unproven English football, never mind Premier League football. And then after that, you're kind of scratching your head and go, well, Alexis, he could be on the bench, but you're not going to want to rely on him. So, we've got some, while we've actually got a big squad, we've got a bit of a lack of depth at present, which I think will be rectified. You've obviously got people like Hielder, Sirkin, Mundell, Elise, who are out injured at the minute. The four of them are very injury prone, so you're not going to be wanting to rely on them. You can't rely on them for a full season. Luke O'Nien will come back in. I think Luke O'Nien will play. Obviously, in the game tonight, there was no Isidore, and there was no explanation for why he wasn't there. Patterson again missed out. It looks as if he's got an injury. Huggins didn't play and Rigg didn't play. But really, you're kind of looking at who wasn't involved, who could step up. And I think there's a real, and it's kind of testament to the signings that we've made, that we've got this sort of big gulf in class. We've got a good core of really good players that you'd be confident of stepping up. You've probably got 6 or 7 players in that category. You've got a bit of a middle ground with a few players who you think, they could come in and do a job. Then you've got this other ground here at the end that you kind of need those players who've got loads of potential. Like in Gavan with you, the 2 young lads at fullback, I thought looked great. But you're not going to be chucking them into a Premier League season anytime soon. So you've got a load of potential, which obviously as a club, that's what we want. We want to develop these players and grow these players. You've got a big chunk there that need to go out on loan. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be really interesting how these next few weeks sort of transpire in terms of transfer activity. But again, I think the pre-season's got off to a really promising start. And, that midfield is absolutely the highlight.
I was going to say, actually, Mark, it was something I was going to mention before and I've forgotten. You just reminded me. It's quite funny the impact in such a short space of time these new signings have had, because, come an hour after the final whistle at Wembley, we're talking about our squad and we're like, yeah, Isidore will be all right in the Premier League. Mayenda will be all right in the Premier League. Dan Neil can step up. Dan Ballard can step up. And all of a sudden we've signed these, the Diarras, the Sadikis, the Tolbys, the Adingras. And all of a sudden our expectations of the players that we thought were going to lead us to Premier League survival are all of a sudden touch and go as to whether or not and how much they're going to be able to contribute. So in such a short space of time, they've just driven the levels and the expectation so high that we're now questioning, is Mayenda going to be able to lead the line for us this season? Whereas, when he's banging that goal in, the equaliser at Wembley, we're like, he's the saviour. He's going to score the goals in the Premier League. I just thought it was I mean, it's a good thing because those standards are they've gone up 50% in terms of our expectations and what we now, it's almost like we've had our eyes opened as to what Premier League quality is. So yeah, I thought it was just a really interesting point to make.
No, I think it is, but that to me is testament to the club's approach, because before the transfer activity started, I think all of us had in our heads, right, this team will go up, we'll obviously buy some players, but we'll keep doing the same thing. Like we have kept doing the same thing, but we've just done it at maybe 2 or 3 levels above what I thought they would do. I didn't think we'd go out and spend as much money as we have. And I think, again, you come back to the point with Le Fee stepping up, and you're kind of seeing the real Enzo Le Fee, obviously being fit, playing in his proper position, but surrounded by good players because they create the space for him, create the angles far better than lesser players will do so. And, don't get us wrong, I think Mayenda is a brilliant player, and I think Mayenda will do a lot this season. I just don't think I would be relying on him to be our lead striker for 38 games. And I think he's got to be part of 3 or 4 strikers who can rotate and come on and do different things at different stages of the game. But you bang on, like our expectations have been elevated about what the rest of the team looks like by the quality of, particularly Sadiki and Diarra. I think the quality of those two combined with Le Fee, you can't go, shit, like we've, like, this is one of those things that you'll kind of come back to in 6 months' time and go, you dickhead, what are you talking about? But like that midfield to me is a top 10 Premier League midfield. I think it's got such, if you keep them 3 fit, that's you kind of looking upwards rather than downwards.
I mean, it's a £70 million midfield, mate. So just by figures alone,
chicken feed in the Premier League, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's very true. Yeah, top 4, maybe at the top 4 level, maybe, but yeah.
But I think then you kind of go, well, okay, we actually need to supplement that with other signs around it, again, to help get the best out of them, because if they've got strikers that are putting away the chances that they can create, if they're getting strikers who are making the runs to enable them to play the through balls, if they're getting the defence behind them that they feel comfortable pushing forward and taking a risk or 2 more because they're assured that the people behind them are going to sweep things up, you'll get more out of that midfield 3 as well. So it's going to be really, I just think I am still at this really excited stage of the season, which I'm going to enjoy because it probably won't last for a month or 2. But I'm really excited about what the rest of that team looks like when we get towards the end of August, because I think if the club keep on doing what they're doing with the ambition that they've shown so far, then it could be an interesting season for us.
And can I just add in as well that tonight it was on Sky Sports Germany that a move back to the Premier League with Sunderland would certainly appeal to Granit Xhaka. So we're talking about this midfield 3, and then you could be potentially throwing him in the mix too. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. Like, it is really exciting. But I think Bomber, you really touched on the key point in all of this. We're driving up standards, and you've got to do that if you want to stay in the Premier League, and not just stay in the Premier League, but do it pretty comfortably. You go out and sign good players who are going to do that for you, and there's no room for sentiment. Ultimately, I mean, I love Dan Neil, I love Anthony Patterson, I love Luke O'Nien, I love Dan Ballard, but if we bring in players who are better than them, then it's up to them to step up, really. Sunderland can't stand still. We've got to, it's taken us 8 years to get back to the Premier League, and we're quite clearly, with the transfer business we've already conducted, we're quite clearly not prepared to let that opportunity just slip through our fingers the way that some of the other teams have. And that's going to mean recruiting good footballers. So I'm just, all I can say off the back of tonight is that midfield really does get me excited and gives us a lot of optimism for the start of the season. And I hadn't really realised as well, just one other quick point, hadn't really realised until Martin listed all the players off there, we're practically missing a full 11 of players to injury tonight. So that second half team probably would have looked a lot different had, a couple of players been available. So it's right. On top. So on top of, we're sitting here, we're quite optimistic. And I said, actually, that second half team did all right. A lot of them players probably didn't expect to play much in pre-season. You can't tell me like Lavery. Yeah, well, like Lavery, Blondie, Johnson, Jensen Jones, Harrison Jones, playing at left back. You're probably just happy to be on the pitch. A lot of these players would probably not have been as involved as they have been. So really, it's them stepping up and taking a chance. And if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. But yeah, standards have certainly risen as a result of the players we've signed. You can't deny that. I think when you're putting out a team of effectively Sunderland reserves against a quality team and they're holding their own for 45 minutes, for me, that's fantastic. It's a representation of the standards being risen. So,
do you know what speaks volumes, Gav? It speaks volumes. We've been talking for nearly 40 minutes now, and we've gone on like 4 or 5 different topics, and every single time we've brought it back to that midfield three. That's how good they were, and how exciting they were to watch, and how exciting we all are to see how they get on in the Premier League. We've talked about second half teams, we talked about defence, and it's always come back to that midfield three.
Yeah,
but your point there, Gav, in terms of like the second team, if people had been fit, right? So if everyone was fit, our second half team could have been Patterson in goal, Niall Huggins, Adji Olise, Luke O'Nien, Dennis Serkin in defence, Chris Rigg, Alan Brown, Dan Neil in central midfield, Patrick Roberts, Romain Mundle, and Wilson Isidore.
That's a good side, isn't it?
Well, that's a bloody strong side, isn't it? In championship terms, that was kind of our side for a lot of the season, or could have been. So, I think, to go back to my point before about that gulf in class, I guess, between the first half and the second half side, it's not necessarily the squad composition, but it's an injury thing at present as well, isn't it? So it's good, there's fierce competition for places. And I think the challenge for, we haven't even talked about Chris Rigg. Chris Rigg's missed these 2 games through a little knock, you presume. But he's going to be somebody who's banging on the door and really wanting to come in to challenge for first team place. Isidore's going to be there. Romain Mundle's obviously a first team player in waiting once he recovers from his injury. So there's so much competition there just bubbling under that, hopefully some of those players really stand up and reach that level that they're being set by the new arrivals.
Yeah, well, we've managed to do 40-odd minutes on a 1-0 pre-season defeat, lads. I don't know how we've done it. I've had a really good bit crap there. I enjoyed it. And look, if we can sit here after a loss in pre-season and talk for 40 minutes, we've obviously got a lot to talk about. There's obviously been a lot to pull out from the performance, and that was definitely the case. And yeah, kind of sets us up nicely for the rest of the games. I think I think this trip to Portugal has been very beneficial for the club. Good connection between the fans over there and the team and stuff. I mean, Craig's been sending us photos of the kids with the players and stuff, and there's been lots of that going on, loads of, interaction between the squad and the staff and the fans and things like that. But then the workouts have been good. We've played 2 strong sides. We haven't won either of the games, but at the same time, I come away pretty happy with what I've seen. I'm really interested now to see that next step up. So when we play Hearts, let's see an hour, 75 minutes from the strongest team against the Hearts team, who you mentioned about Sporting going into the season. Might be wrong, but I think Hearts' season's already started because they've got the Scottish Cup games. Scottish Cup, I think the League Cup started before. So, I mean, if I might be wrong, but if this hasn't, they're very close to the season starting. So again, Hearts are going to be probably a couple of weeks ahead of us in terms of their prep. So that should be another good test for the squad. And by that point, hopefully we'll have the likes of Rigg back, we'll have Patterson involved, Isidore back involved, maybe Huggins back involved, and we might even have another signing or 2 in by the time we get to Hearts. So, things are shaping up nicely. We can't complain. And look, I don't think anybody really watching that game tonight will have come away feeling down or disappointed with the fact we got beat, because for me, certainly in the first half, we were the better team, and certainly a lot to cling on to and a lot of hope we can take from that. So let's see how the rest of the week goes anyways. I'm sure, as we mentioned, on a transfer front, there's going to be plenty to talk about this week. I mean, the Granit Xhaka thing's not going away, and because the Loriente deal fell through, we're probably going to be back in for another left winger. I think the El Canous links have came back up in the last couple of days, so that could be one that we're looking at. We obviously need defenders. I think centre-half has to be the next priority. We have tried to recruit a goalkeeper, and we haven't done that yet, so that's a possibility. There's the Dan Neil thing. There's obviously a lot of players have to go, and I think didn't Lebris say this, that he felt like the the squad as a whole, after the Shields game, I think he said this, the squad as a whole needed like 2 or 3 weeks before we could make some decisions on who would go where and things like that. So I would imagine that a fair few of those who were involved over in Portugal will probably head off on loan or get moves. So we'll probably look a lot different this time next week. But looking forward to the rest of the week and seeing what happens with Sunderland in terms of transfers and stuff. So we'll be back with pods throughout the week. We're here every single day on How Are the Podcast, as you are probably already aware now. You can't get rid of us. Certainly can't get rid of me. I think I'm sick of the sound of my own voice. So if you're not sick of the sound of me, then thank you very much. But I am. But yes, we will be back with more pods this week. Certainly back tomorrow. Just need to say thank you very much, Bomber.
Thank you, mate. Thanks as always.
Thank you. And cheers, Martin. Good to have you back, mate.
Thank you, Gav. It's good to be back.
Yes,
Sound
it
like
is
a waste
indeed.
of
By the way, you won't hear from me at the weekend because that's who I'm going to see. Just to just to get that in there, I'm going to see Oasis at Wembley. So if you do hear us over the weekend, it'll be pre-recorded because I'm going to be pissed for 3 days in the capital. So that should be nice. Thank you very much, listeners. Like I say, we'll be back with another pod tomorrow. We'll catch you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.